Do you tend to get offended real easy? Do people just make you angry? Do you not just hearing advice at all? Every time someone tells you something, you just get mad? Well, hey, today's podcast is for you as we talk about being offended. This is going to be a good episode. Join me today for the Surging Forward podcast. Hello, and welcome to the Surging Forward broadcast, where we're helping you to have a positive view in a negative world. My name is David Valentine, and I'm here to help you see the value in the job you do and how you can keep surging forward. Well, hello, and welcome to the Surging Forward podcast. I'm Dave Valentine, your host for this episode, and we've had a couple great interviews and a lot of people talking on the show, and we have a lot more coming up also. So a lot of people are reaching out, and I want to share some of these great success stories with you. In today's episode, first of all, I want to welcome all the new listeners out there. You know, each week I'm getting comments of people like, "Wow, great, like your show," and it's kind of coming from around the world too. Again, I keep saying that, and that's really cool. And I didn't really ever emphasize that it was going to be that far of a reach. So I want to thank you guys for sharing it. And those of you that are sharing it and letting people know, that's what it's about. We're all out there helping one another. So, if you feel inclined to share this episode, you can put it on your Facebook page or share it. You can find us on Facebook, and again, we're growing. We're growing, little by little, but it's getting out there. But I'm happy for the response and the emails that I'm getting. And it's a big encouragement to me is, we're going forward with this show here. And I'm still learning the technology part, so kind of bear with me on a little bit of that. So again, just thanks a lot for all that. And I want to welcome, if this is your first time listening, and if you haven't listened to any other episodes, you might want to go back and listen to the other ones. This is episode number 51. And today, we're going to be asking the question, are you easily offended? That's a, tough topic, but we're going to cover that because that's the things we want to deal with to help you and me also to keep surging forward. A lot of times people ask me, they say, why do you do this show, Dave? And I go, well, I do it because it helps me as a leader. I was just on I just did an interview, and a person asked me to be on his podcast. It was actually, Dave Rabakova from, Awaken the Leader. I'm probably messing up his last name. I always do. But, me and him just did an interview, together, and he asked me to be on his show. And, he asked me a question like, why do I do this? And I had to be honest because the reason the show is done is basically to continue to keep me surging forward also, because it helps me be aware of what's going on out in the field. And that's really a part of leadership. And so that's part of what this show is about, is helping you to become a leader in the trades also. And before we go any further, I'd like to give Clint Manning a big shout out. He actually made a comment on my Facebook page, and I want to say thanks, Clint, for what it says. He made a comment, and again, usually I don't like to float my boat a lot. I feel a little embarrassed about it, but I want to recognize people that take the time to write publicly on the page, because most of the time people just send me emails or they'll give me a direct message and stuff like that, and that's fine. And that's what I encourage, because a lot of people don't like to be out in the limelight, and so they feel embarrassed or whatever. But if you want to leave a comment on my page, great. Like I say, and I'll always say thank you for it, because I really appreciate those, because that lets the world know that you appreciate it also, and not just coming back to me. But Clint Manning wrote on my page back a couple days ago, Dave has a great podcast and takes an honest and realistic look at what it's like to work in the electrical and other trades. He helps to refocus on the positive aspects in a normally negative environment. His honesty and transparency is amazing, or refreshing, I should say. And that's really what it's about. He kind of said all of what Surging Forward means right there in a nutshell. So thanks, Clint, for that response. And I'm glad that's what's getting out there, because we do work in a rough environment. I've been doing this for 30 years and I've been in the grind, and it is a tough environment. You have so many things coming against you, not just the customer, but you got that tough foreman you got to deal with. You got that bad leader out there. There are a lot of bad leaders out there. And granted, I hear about them all the time because they'll argue with me over the silliest things, which is what this episode is going to be about. So stay tuned as we talk about that, because that's part of leadership. You have to be able to deal with the negativity. And we hear it all around us. And so that's why I like to share the success stories. That's why I like to show the positivity. That's why I like things like Mike Rowe, where he talks about the tradesman and how you can make a good living as a trade, in the trades. And I've also hooked up on another fighting the contractors fight. Wait a minute, what exactly it is? I just got referred to a great podcast, and I want to make sure I get it right here. So just bear with me just for a moment here as I look this up on my phone, because I just signed up for it and set up his podcast. And Tom Reber, that's it. It's the Contractor Fight. Check out that podcast. What an amazing podcast. For those of you that are contractors out there, one of my listeners recommended me to his podcast. And so I'm just putting a shout out for him out there on that today, on that. And I want to, I'm hoping to really learn from him also. And see, that's what it's about, because it is a battle out there. You're battling with clients and customers. And again, a lot of times you're battling in a field. Let's face it. We deal with that. I know even on my end, even as an instructor now, and I'm an inspector, and, I do things on a job site, I have to deal with the negativity all the time. But we don't let that define us as tradesmen. Tradesmen have a very big value, and we're portrayed in such a negative light in the real world because of a select few. Yeah, it's only a few people that are the negative, but it's just like anything else. It's just like when you take a whiteboard, and I've done this in class before. When you take a whiteboard, you think about this for a minute. You draw the little dot right up on the board. And people come into my class. First thing I say into class, okay, what do we see on the board? Almost every single person, 90% or more of the people, will say they see the black dot. Nobody sees all the white around the board. Nobody sees all the good, but all they see is the dot. Well, see, guys, that's what happens in the world. That's the perception of tradesmen. They see the select few that are raunchy, crabby, rip-off artists, used car salesmen, the whole deal. They don't see the honest and the integrity and the pride that goes into building that. They don't see that integrity issue that's there. That is the heart of a true tradesman. They're out there making your air conditioner work. They go out there and work in the hot attics on 100-degree days to make your stuff work. Yeah, they get paid good money. Yeah, it's about the money. We all want to get paid for our work. But you know how many of them out there, it's not that they need the money. They already got a nice truck. They got a nice house. They're doing very well. But they still go out and do it because they value what they do and they care. And I'm one of those, I still believe there's a lot of those out there. Why do I teach? Because I know that the trades can make a difference in people's lives. I know that there is a lot of honesty and integrity out there. I've had more tradesmen help me out in my career than anybody else. And when we look at theology and you look at different things, it's almost biblical how tradesmen will help each other out. They always have each other's back. They'll help each other out in a tough time. But what they won't tolerate a lot of times is the negativity. They get old. It gets old. And so a lot of times they really don't like the stereotyping that goes on either. And it's amazing how many people enforce that. So that's kind of one of the things I want to talk about on today's podcast. Are you one of those that can't be corrected and you get easily offended? I had an interesting fellow I was talking to a while back, and he asked a question. And the thing is, the way he asked the question, it wasn't appropriate for the situation or the environment we were in at the moment. And so I happened to talk with him, and I says, this is not the time and place. Well, right away, he got offended, and he got up and left. Okay? And so I approached him later on, and I says, what's the matter? He says, well, you shouldn't have did that, and so forth and so on. And I go, well, it wasn't. It wasn't the time and the place. Because you have to understand where you're at. There's times, it's just like I tell my class, there is no wrong question. There is no question that should not be asked. But there's a time and a place for it. Okay? You don't want to ask a question when you are perceived as being a tradesman or an expert in a field. You don't want to ask what's perceived as being a basic question. There are certain questions you might want to go off and say, hey, let me think about this for a minute. If you don't have a basic understanding of your field or a foundation, sometimes it's better just to be silent and listen. And then you go off after the course and do a one-on-one. Because what happens in today's world, if you do ask the wrong question, you're going to get called out. That's where the reputation comes in. That's why contractors and tradesmen of different sorts, that's why a lot of times they're deemed as, what's the word? I don't know. And I don't want to say anything bad about used car salesmen. They're just making a living too. Not all used car salesmen are bad. There's a lot of good ones out there making a living because some of us need a used car. I had a used truck back in the day. I mean, that's all I could afford. And it was a good truck. And the guy that sold it to me was a good guy. And he was fair and honest. But, it's the ones that rip you off that stand out. And for some reason, I don't understand why that is. You look at the news today. What do we like to listen to on the news? It's all the negativism. I was listening to one of Dave's podcasts on 48 Days to the Work You Love, and I was listening to his podcast, and he had a good point. It's like he didn't even listen to the news anymore. And it's like, wow, that is so true. I've gotten to the point where I'll listen to podcasts on the way home, and I'll catch up on the news maybe once every 2 or 3 days. You know what's amazing? Nothing changed in 1 or 2 days. Okay? The world's still around. I catch up on some of the big issues on the world, but nothing really changed. And I found that I can keep a more positive attitude. I'm not so aggravated during the day. That negativity just eats at you. And a lot of times it makes us so we get offended so easy because we think everybody's attacking at us because we hear everything else being attacked. You see, when somebody comes at me and they fire at me, a lot of times what I have to do, I have to say, okay, where's he coming from? And, in the Old Testament and Psalms, it talks about a soft answer turns away wrath. And so when somebody says something that offends you, and maybe it is offensive, maybe it is something that just really gets under your skin, and it probably wasn't the appropriate thing to say at that point. How do you respond? Maybe you're right and they are wrong. How do you respond? The best way to respond is with a soft answer. Maybe the way to respond is, what did you mean by that? Respond with a question. Or, how do you mean that? Well, the guy comes back and says, well, I meant that you're a jerk. I meant that you're an idiot. That's exactly what I meant. Okay, well, now they're telling you how they really feel. And it might not be those choice words. It might be a little worse. So we know how that comes across. Well, right away, you get burned up. It's like, well, if that's how you feel, I'm ready to come at you. Come on, let's go. No, that's not the proper response. The proper response may be, hey, I apologize. My intent was not to get you upset. You know what? That's what a leader does. They swallow that pride. Now, if I was to sit here on the other end of this microphone and tell you that in all my years of leadership, I do that all the time, my friends, I would be lying. I've got to be transparent. Just like my friend Dustin. We talked about that last week on last week's episode. Being transparent. No, I don't always give that response. But I will tell you one thing, what I've done. When I do give the wrong response to somebody and I give a response back in anger, I walk away 10 to 15 minutes later. Most every time I go back to that person and I apologize. The first thing out of their mouth is, "What are you apologizing for, Dave?" And I go, "I apologize for the way I reacted." I'm not apologizing for me being wrong. I'm apologizing for the way I reacted. That's where the honesty and the transparency and the integrity come into play. You see, my friends, we are going to get bombarded with that negative view. We're going to get bombarded with people that don't agree with us. And I encourage that in my class. And I encourage that even in the course that when I teach my courses. You know, if you disagree with something I say, by all means, challenge me. Now, there's a way to challenge and there's a way not to challenge. You can challenge in a very conservative, positive, upbeat, constructive way, or you can challenge in a very negative, beat you up, I'm better than you, and you stink way. That's the way I like to call it. Keep it plain and simple. But the key to it is when you do it in the constructive way, you create and open a dialogue for learning. Your goal as a leader, when you are a leader out there, is to work to constantly diffuse and keep the fires down. You are a constant firefighter. Being a leader doesn't mean you're never going to have any fires. Being a good leader doesn't mean you're never going to have issues. Believe me, being a good leader, you're probably going to have more issues. Because if you're a negative leader and you quote with the crowd and you float with everybody else and everybody, a bunch of people hate you and a bunch of people like you, well, you're going to have a lot of people liking you for the wrong reasons because you're showing favoritism or whatever the case may be. Now, if you're a good leader, you're going to be a strong leader. You're going to be surrounded by a strong group of friends. But you're probably going to have a core group of people that are just constantly nailing at you and coming against you and going after you for everything that you do. So it's important to have that integrity and that stronghold and being able to handle those issues because they're going to come. It's just like dealing with kids and dealing with children when you're raising children. It's a lot easier just to let them keep doing something wrong. It's a lot easier just to turn your head and not worry about it. And then when something bad happens, you turn around and blame the world. You can blame something else. You can blame them. You can blame anybody else instead of where the blame belongs. But when you step up to the plate and you take the blame and you confront the issue in a very constructive way, two things might happen. The first thing that happens, that person may still hate you. He'll still not like you. He's still going to bash you. But you know what? He'd have done that anyway. The other thing that might possibly happen, and this is the most fascinating thing, he might go, "Wow, you got a point. I see where you're coming from. I like the way you handled that situation." Now, a person who used to be an enemy and didn't like you is now somebody that's on your side. And they're going to help you, and they're going to do a good job for you. And when you give them room to save face, you give them room to think about their action. And that, my friends, is called leading by example. So, we all get offended. People are going to say things to us that just make our blood boil inside. It's like, really? What, are you kidding me? Who raised you? Nobody talks like that. We get that all the time. And we think those thoughts like, wow, where are you coming from with that? That's nowhere near what I meant. I didn't mean to do that. Why are you accusing me of this? False accusation. That seems to be the big thing. Well, understand where that person's coming from. Many times the people that spew that stuff out and attack you in that way, there's issues going on with themselves. I know in the past when I used to attack people that way, it was because I was hiding something. It's because I didn't want them to see my vulnerability. So let me puff my chest out and get all bad and break bad before they can see my vulnerabilities. That's kind of what happens. So once you understand that, now you can just confront it by simply asking a question or apologizing for offending them. You're not apologizing for the statement you made. You're apologizing that the statement offended them, which is true. You want it to be a sincere apology. My intent is never to offend anybody. My intent is never to hurt anybody. But sometimes the things that I do, they do because I have different values than other people. I mean, there's people that's gotten offended and upset with me because, I'm a Christian guy. Does that mean I go beat everybody over the head with religion? No, because I don't believe in religion. Now, that's a story for another talk, and we can really get into some deep discussions on that. But I am a follower of Christ, and I believe in the Bible, and I'm a very true follower of Christ. But I have a lot of issues with religion. But I think that you go back in the New Testament, I think there was a lot of issues with religion then too. But that's not what we're talking about here. And what I'm talking about is we all have different beliefs. I don't care if you're Muslim. I don't care if you're Buddhist. I don't care what your religion is. I don't care what your walk of life is. I don't care what your political views are. People are going to have different views. And we have to learn to accept one another's views, not to be totally offended by them. Because once we can accept and agree to disagree, that's when you say something to me, I don't get as offended anymore. And then I can learn, hey, I'm going to assume that that wasn't directed towards me personally. We have to stop taking everything personally. And that's something I have a wonderful wife. She helps me out with that because, a lot of times I take things personally. I may not show it in public, but in private I'll go, man, I didn't mean to hurt that guy. I feel so bad that he failed the test, Maybe I didn't do a good enough job. Well, I can only do so much. I can't control another person's feelings. You cannot control another person's feelings. The only thing we can control is our feelings. The only thing we can control is our reactions. The only things we can control is our choices. We can make a choice each and every time we deal with a circumstance. So, my friends, hopefully that gives a little bit of insight. Not a whole big story. But if you're easily offended, start tomorrow and say, hey, I'm not going to let somebody else influence how I feel. I am going to stay positive. And so I'm just going to ask the question, did I offend you? And why are you so offended at me? And then I'm going to sit back and listen with both ears. Because the good Lord gave us 2 ears to listen and only 1 mouth to speak. And I'm preaching to the choir with me, brother. Let me tell you. Because I struggle with that a lot. But I'm learning. And as we go along, the more we listen, the more we hear. And the more we hear, the more we learn. And the more we learn, the more we can continue to keep surging forward and make a difference in other people's lives. So again, I want to thank you for listening today. And those of you who, I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you like this episode, share it with somebody. We're on Facebook. Check out the Facebook page. You'll see what's really cool on our Facebook page. If you take a look how it's published now, it's really cool. It's published in the audio format and I put the video format out. So you can share one or the other. It doesn't matter. What's really cool about the audio format is you could share it and they could just listen. Not really a whole lot to watch here on the video, except for just watching me rant, I'm hoping the videos are going to get better as we go along. But again, feel free to check them out there. And again, we're on Facebook, or you can share us and show people how to sign up for a podcast. You can go to YouTube, and we have actually a podcast video on how to sign up for a podcast. And it's pretty simple. Basically, you just go to any podcast app, just show your friends how to do it, and do a search for Surging Forward, and you'll find the Surging Forward podcast right there. little guy with a briefcase showing you how to surge forward in your career. That's what he's doing. Always surging forward, moving forward there. So you can find that there. And again, share it out to people. Let them know about it. And give us your comments. Again, I want to say thanks to Clint Manning for putting that comment there on the website there. Appreciate that encouragement. That's what really helps me out. So if you put a comment on my page, please be aware. I'll share it out to the world. I'll say thank you. And I really appreciate that. So otherwise, keep the emails coming in. You can email me to dave@surgingforward.com. Very simple, not hard. DAVE @surgingforward.com. Email me your questions. Set us up. Always look forward to hearing from you guys. And I want to thank you. Go to iTunes, subscribe. Whatever your podcast is, subscribe. Subscribers have gone up dramatically in the past couple months. So we are approaching our 1-year episode. You're not going to want to miss next week's episode as we talk about Awaken the Leader. Great interview with David Rubacava. I think I'm saying it right, Dave. Send me an email if I'm not. But hey, this brother here, right here, he's a great leader. And the neat thing about it, he's way on the West Coast over there. He's got a great message for young leaders out there and older leaders. And leadership goes across the board. You can't get enough of it. There's always more to learn. When you stop learning, my friends, you keep surging forward. You stop surging forward. So stay safe and keep surging forward. Until next time, be safe, my friends. Bye-bye.